In my opinion, I prefer the workflow with the actual Dolby Atmos renderer from Dolby Labs. It's just a little bit more exciting if you ask me. So I'm going to show you how I use that one, and then let's just touch on it very, very briefly and, see the difference. So this is what the actual Dolby Atmos renderer looks like from Dolby Labs. It's obviously very, very beautiful, but that's on a side note. Right. So now this is a record from my EP that's about to drop soon. I'm just it's a very, very, very nice record. All right, now, so let's talk about the second workflow that is available in Logic Pro X. When you install the Dolby Atmos renderer in your system, it automatically creates two Atmos mixing templates. So as you can see, we have two templates for mixing in Atmos. We have the Dolby Atmos 64 channel and the Dolby Atmos 128 channel template. So now let me show you how to actually set up your session for mixing in Atmos with the Dolby Atmos renderer from Dolby Labs. Okay, let's say I want to start a new Atmos mix. I'm going to select one of either of these ones. Personally, I always use the 128 channel because I usually almost max out the channels, right? And now, as you can see, we've opened a new session for our Atmos mix. And if you notice, we have all of the channels already preloaded in our Logic Pro session, right? Which is actually very cool. The first thing you see here at the very top is the bed channel. Let's go back to the renderer real quick. If you remember, you have 10 bed channels and 118 object channels to work with when you mix in Atmos. So these are the 10 bed channels and the Atmos render. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Yeah, that's it. And these other ones are all the object channels. Okay. There's something I need to point out real quick. From 11 to 58, they're all mono object channels, or let's call them mono tracks linked to mono object channels. So if you want to use this for stereo signal, you have to do what's called an object pair. I'm going to show you how that works in a bit. There's one more thing we have to set up before we get started. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go into our mixer section and go straight to the 129th channel. Now the 129th channel is not a channel that you use during your mix. You don't send any signal to the 129th channel. This just houses the Dolby LTC generator, right? That's linear time code generator. This is it. So I'm not going to go too much details about what the LTC generator does or how it works, but basically just know that it connects the DAW to the Atmos renderer and it enables the DAW to send signals to the Atmos renderer accurately. All right, and this is how you activate the LTC in the renderer. You just come and click here and then that's it. You've activated the LTC generator and then they both send these signals back and forth. So now on the 129 channel, this is where you're going to put your binaural setting. If you remember when we were talking about the workflow with the Atmos renderer that comes native with Logic, we talked about binaural setting. It's very important if you're mixing in binaural mode. So we're going to go to the 129 channel and then go over to our plugins, go to Dolby Laboratories and select the binaural settings. When you install the Dolby Atmos renderer, the binaural setting comes with it as well as the Dolby Atmos panel. So this is the binaural setting. Again, just the way it works with the renderer that comes native with Logic, you use the binaural settings to control the distance of your sound in your headphones when you're mixing in binaural monitoring mode. Personally, when I'm mixing in the binaural monitoring format, I like to set all of my bed channels to near. So that means the left, center, right, all of the bed channels, I'm just going to put them to near. And then, like I said, when you're mixing the binaural range format, the LFE is usually off. And then all of the object channels, I would set based on what I need for the record, right? Based on what the particular instrument needs. Typically, if I have my vocals in any of these object channels, right, I would set that to near. And then risers, I'll probably put risers far, strings and parts far, but it still depends on what the record needs, what the record requires. Again, remember the steps is start a new project from template. You select the template you want to use. You come to your LTC channel, which is the 229 channel, and then you load the Dolby Atmos binaural setting plugin. That's where you do your binaural setting for your Dolby Atmos mix. So let's talk about how you prepare your songs for mixing in Dolby Atmos, okay? Technically, there are a few ways, but I'm going to talk about the method I feel is most convenient, right? And also based on my experience. So before you bring your songs into your Dolby Atmos mix session, you have to first of all make sure you've finished mixing and mastering your song first in stereo, right? And then you export every individual track, right, or stems of that mix with all of the plugins baked in, including the master plugins. Typically, I prefer to have the reverb, delays, any other bus processing I might do within the stereo mix, right? Choruses and whatnot. I like to have them in a separate track as well. So I have more control over where I want to place them in my Atmos mix. Personally, I find that reverb and delay do very well in the high channels. So if you have your reverb and delays in separate tracks, you're able to place them on a higher channel while your vocals can sit on ear level. I will do a proper mix breakdown later to explain all of these things. It might get a bit confusing, but trust me, it's actually very, very simple. So like I said, you finish your mix and master in stereo, you export all of the stems. That's what you're going to import into your Dolby Atmos session for your Dolby Atmos mix. In Logic currently, I don't know how to do it at once. So what I do is I export every single track, like I solo and I export every single track. I know in Pro Tools you can actually do everything at once with their commit to feature, which is very cool. I don't know how to do that in Logic, because if you try to do everything in Logic, you don't get all of the effects with the tracks. Because I know that the only way to do it is you have to turn your buses to tracks and then export, but still you don't get all of the plugins baked in. It's a bit finicky, right? So I just prefer to do it like track by track, solo and export. In my opinion, that's the best way to do with Logic. If you have any ideas on how to do it, let me know. Okay, so that's how you prepare your stereo mix for mixing in Dolby Atmos. So now let's do some basic demonstrations, right? So I can show you how to import your sounds into your Dolby Atmos mix and just talk about some of the things you can do with the Dolby Atmos partner as well. So I'm going to grab this guy and put it right here. Now, if you remember, I said when you're mixing in Dolby Atmos, you have to mix with a sample rate of 48 kilohertz. When you import the track into your Dolby Atmos session, if it wasn't mixed in 40 kilohertz, Logic is going to ask you to convert it to 48 kilohertz, which is great. Also, like I said, Object 11 down to I think 58, they are all mono tracks linked to mono object channels, right? The sound I'm trying to import into Logic is obviously in stereo, right? So you're going to have to change the track format from mono to stereo. Logic will show you a prompt and ask you to do it, and then you click OK. Import because it has a tempo, whatever. Import, bang. Let's play and hear what it sounds like. Yo. Right. Now, if you notice, the sound is only coming from the left side. And if you look at the Dolby Atmos renderer, you will also see that, the sound is only coming from the left channel, right? If you look down here, you see it's just on the left channel. That's because this is a mono track, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to have to link these two tracks as object pairs so we can send the signal to Dolby Atmos renderer, and we'll have the left and the right coming from channels 11 and channels 12. So let me show you how we're going to do that. So we're just going to pull up the Dolby Atmos panel, right? This is it. And if you come up here, you see where it says object pair. You just go and click and then select 12. Now, if I play this piano, right? Now it's coming from channels left and right, objects 11 and 12. Right. It's very important that you do that when you are loading your stereo tracks onto a mono object track. But once you've done that, when you want to import your next instrument, you cannot use 12. You have to imagine that 11 and 12 is left and right, basically. And you go over to 13, and that's where you put your next instrument. And then you repeat the same process and link 13 and 14 and so forth. But once you get to 59 and 60, you can see that it's automatically linked already. 59 to 60 is already automatically linked. These are all stereo object tracks or channels. And if you put a sound here, it just goes straight to the renderer and stays at the corresponding object channels as well. It's that simple. So but now let's look at some of the fun things we can do with the Atmos renderer actually. So there are some very, very fun things here. First thing we're going to look at is this linking. When you select linking, what's happening is we've linked left and right channels together. So whatever we do to the right will affect the left. So if we're moving, the sound from front to back, the right channel will do the same thing, right? It'll move in the same direction. But if we unlink it, when we move the left channel, the right will stay in place. You can see that. Right. Right. Typically, I like to just link them because it's a stereo signal and you want everything to stay in place. And then under here, there's this other function, this mirror X, mirror Y. Mirror X is typically your stereo format, right? Left and right. Mirror Y will bring the right channel down to the back of the room. So you see, it's kind of like moving everything to one side. And then mirror XY moves things diagonally. So it leaves one channel on the left top left or front left, and the other channel at the back right. You can actually make sound move in circles while you mirror X and Y. There's so much fun things you can do. I've done a few Dolby Atmos mixes. In my next videos, I'll do a proper breakdown of those mixes to show you the things that I've done in those mixes. Oh, yeah, there's one more thing. So there's copy. So copy basically just kind of like turns your stereo sound into a mono sound. So, and this is particularly good for when you want to do like automations, like circling automations, right? You want to make things go around in circles. It's just cool. So nice. That's very, very nice. And then down here, you have the movement axis, right? X is left and right. You move things from left to right. Y is forward and backward, right? Z is down and up. If you look down to the renderer, you notice the sound moving up to the height channels and down. And then we have size to increase the width of the sound. So let me show you what that does on the renderer actually. So let me take the size down to 0, right? And if you notice, I'm just gonna put this here. Let me put it back on the front channel and back to mirror X. Okay, cool. So if you notice right now, our piano is only playing from the left and the right channels, right? But if I spread it, if I increase the size, what happens is the sound kind of like spread to the other channels. So this is what it looks like when it's spread. You can see that we're getting signals or sound coming from the rest of the other monitors, right? So cool. Another very, very important feature that I like so much in the Atmos panel is the sequencer feature. In my opinion, it's another more convenient way of doing automations. For example, let's do a sequence. We're going to make the piano go from front to back. Once you activate the sequencer down here, you go to edit, and then you have all of these tools to draw. This is freehand. This one lets you just move things around however you want to move it. This move things in circles. This is a square motion. This is just a straight line, and this is forward and backward. Let's make the piano go from the front of the room to the back of the room, right? So let's just draw a straight line. That's it. And then you hit done. If I play now, you see, now we have the piano moving from the front of the room to the back of the room. But obviously, this is very, very fast. This is not a musical, right? This can work for some effects, right? But for something like this, you want it to move gently. And then that's why you come here. You come to step duration, right? And then you can select how fast we have the sound moving in the room. So the higher the number, the slower it goes. Let's go 32 and see. Right. Let me raise the height. Man, this thing is so cool. So that's it for the Dolby Atmos panel. Like I said, I prefer this workflow, right? I prefer working with the Dolby Atmos panel. I prefer working with the Dolby Atmos renderer. I've done some amazing mixes as well with the Dolby renderer that comes native with Logic, but there's so much more you can do with this. For example, you can set up your sequencer and still go ahead and do some more automations. It's endless possibilities with this workflow. I know I said the most convenient way to bring your song for mixing in Dolby Atmos is to export every track after you've done the mix and master in stereo. You can actually do your mix and master in your Dolby Atmos session, right? You can actually put your effects, your everything you need to do. But the thing is, Dolby Atmos is very CPU intensive, right? Very, like for example, this is the renderer. The renderer already is taking 30% of my CPU. So imagine loading all of my plugins and whatnot. It will be ridiculous, right? And because you cannot do a lot of bus processing with Dolby, actually you can do bus processing, but technically if you are working with bus, you have to make sure whatever you send to that bus can only go to a particular set of channels. Like you cannot like, have so many tracks, right, going to left and right, whatever, and then send them to one bus like you can do with stereo. That's the only issue. So that's why it's better to actually do your mixing and mastering in stereo and then export all your stems for Dolby Atmos mixing and mastering. And you can still do your mastering as well in Dolby Atmos because file filter plugins work in Dolby Atmos as well. You can literally use them for mastering in Dolby Atmos. But another reason why that's not so necessary at this time is because when you mix in Dolby Atmos, you must not exceed minus 18 dB LUFS. mix. So if you've done your mix and master in stereo and then you bring it to Dolby Atmos, most likely what you'll be doing is turning down your levels to meet the minus 18 dB LUFS standard rather than using the limiter to increase your levels and whatnot. One last thing I need to mention: when you've done mixing your song in Dolby Atmos, there's only one format that's acceptable for distribution, and that's ADM-BWF, right? So when you finish mixing and mastering your song in Dolby Atmos, you have to export in ADM-WF. If you're using the workflow with the Dolby Atmos render that comes native with Logic, when you're done with your mix, you just have to go to export, right? And then you go to project as ADM-BWF. It's not showing here right now because I'm using the workflow with the Dolby Atmos render from Dolby Labs, right? Not the one native with Logic Pro. So yeah, when you're done with your mix, you export as ADM-WF. It's a broadcast wave file because that's the only way you can retain all of the metadata, all of your panning, your positions, everything you've done within the mix. That's the only format that can store those informations. And by the way, that's minus 18 dB integrated, right? You cannot go louder than that when you mix and master in Dolby Atmos. So lastly, there's also the Dolby Atmos assembler. It's actually very, very, very dope for when you are, mastering your project like EPs and whatnot, right? So you can make sure that all your songs are properly level matched. So this is another thing I'm going to go into much later. Also, if you're interested in listening to some of my work, I'm going to leave a Spotify link to some songs I mixed and mastered in stereo, and also an Apple link to the Private Party Volume 1 EP by Lamborghini. I mixed and mastered all of the records on that EP in Dolby Atmos. I currently have 2 EPs I'm working on, and I cannot wait for them to drop. I'm mixing all of the records in Dolby Atmos as well. So this is just a quick overview to help you get started if you are interested in mixing in Dolby Atmos, right? If you have questions, let me know. Because mixing Dolby Atmos can sound a bit intimidating at first, right? Because I know how it was when I was trying to learn how to do this thing, right? So if you have questions, let me know. Ask me. I'm going to do my best to break it down to the point where you can understand it. It's actually not that difficult. You just need a bit of patience. And also the terminologies can be intimidating, but it's really not that difficult, okay? If you have questions, leave in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to explain to the best of my knowledge. All right, so that's gonna be it for now. Again, if you like this content, make sure you leave me a like and subscribe for more, because there's a lot of amazing things about the pop-up from the Atmos room by Ben Macaulay. No joke. All right, I'm almost at 1K subs. Once I get to 1K, I'm giving out that headphone. I've lost the headphone behind me, okay? So let's just build a community, right? That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to build a community of people that are ready to become very, very dope music producers and audio engineers. All right, so let's do this, okay? Like, subscribe, share. Do you understand? Let's grow. Let's all be dope. So that's going to be for now. I shall see you on the next one. Ben Macaulay out. Peace.